Welcome, everyone. This is Mike Bordenaro, the Executive Director at the Asset Leadership Network, and I'm very happy to have our good friend, Hugh Sinclair, back for a conversation. And before we get started talking with Hugh, I want to thank our patron members and our organizational members, which are growing. Thank you to the companies that are joining at the beginning of this year. A lot of interest and activity. Really appreciate the support. We wouldn't be able to do these programs without your support. And here are some of the programs that we're doing with your support. Next week, we're going to be having Robert Radovanovic. He is a professor at University of Calgary. He has some really wonderful things to say about transportation asset management, specifically road surfaces, and the program he's setting up, an asset management degree program at University of Calgary. Just fascinating. And we're continuing our ALN web series, Value and Benefits from Asset Management, with the Australian Asset Management Council. We have State of Victoria, Australia. It's going to be really exciting to hear what a state is doing with their asset management program 10 years into the future. It's really quite advanced. And then Atlanta Airline Terminal Company is expanding their ISO 55001 certification program, and we'll be hearing about that. So please go to our website and sign up for that next week on February 16th. And then put it on the calendar for March 8th, the City of Greater Geelong, Australia, Municipal Asset Management Showcase. It's the first in a series of at least 3 programs that we're going to have on that, and they'll be touching on infrastructure. So that's leading up to our ALN Summit, Sustainable Value Creation from Infrastructure Asset Leadership. It's in the afternoon on March 15th and 16th. And things are lining up. It's a little bit advanced, so I'm not going to tell you everything that's going on with that for right now, but just wanted to share that that's coming up. And now we can get on with the conversation with you. Hugh, how are you doing?
I'm good, Mike. Good to be with you again. Certainly looking forward to our conversation.
I see you're in the office.
Yes, I'm back in the office. We've been on, currently WSSC, we're still in our phase 3 COVID response in that we've kind of maximized our telework. By the end of this month, we're looking based on the improvement on the metrics to transition into what is or now normal phase 4 operations, where quite a bit of our workforce we've transformed and updated, quite a bit of flexibility to allow a lot more of hybrid telework. So hoping to welcome back my team and everyone else back into the office under this new schedule, which is really a transformation for utilities. We really have taken the time to transform ourselves into what is the workplace of the future. So proud to have been a part of that and helping.
How did that work out for you? Did you feel productivity maintained? Did it increase? Did some things improve and some things slide? Or
well, as with all things with COVID, there are lessons learned, right? I think in general, what we've done is that we've found certainly a lot of improvement in finding more ways to work and finding new ways to work, right? Traditionally, utilities are a very conservative work environment, but I think this in itself has really leveraged the capability for us to move into what are more dynamic workspaces. We've been able to, over that time, I headed up, co-chaired what was our new normal task force when we started COVID. Part of that was really working with our CEO, Carla Reed, and the executive team, along with about a 35 to 40 member team, to really look on various ways that we could utilize this transitional period to improve the organization. One of the big outcomes of that was really developing a new telework policy, right? Which really looked on moving things from a job function and how could we really look on what could be adaptable to various classifications of telework, whether that's full-time, whether that's hybrid or whatever. I think it certainly positioned us to meet the marketplace where it is, right? If you really talk to a lot of us in the utility space, human capital is a real problem right now because, you know, the great resignation is real, right? Mm-hmm. Talent transference is certainly something that's happening, and you need to really just meet the marketplace because it's really been a catalyst over the last 2 years as to what does work mean, right? And we're necessarily not immune to that. One of the challenges I would say that's really there is that from the beginning, we were dealing with the challenge of having a workforce that's somewhat 50-50 split in terms of we have core functions that cannot go in any kind of remote fashion, right? You can't fix a pipe over Zoom, right? You can't run a plant from somewhere else. No. So trying to find equity and parity through that process while also understanding that we need to move with the trends that are there was certainly a challenge, but I think we've met that pretty well. And now we're, you know, worked through the transitional period with that. I think we've found more ways to connect, certainly more ways to work efficiently. I think it's certainly accelerated our digital transformation, right? We've using a lot less paper now, let's put it that way.
It took COVID to get us to the paperless office.
It took COVID to get us there, right? But I think we've found those areas of efficiency improvement that really help to transform and in some ways revolutionize, right? Or the proper evolution of where things were. And I think we've done pretty good on that. Certainly working with the growing pains to establish that new frame of reference for the future is still a challenge, right? Mm-hmm. But I think we're just gonna have to meet the task head on, but I think we've navigated very well, certainly under the leadership of our CEO. I think she has certainly embedded the value of the worker safety, and a compassionate leadership certainly has benefited us through this entire thing. I think coming out of this, it was clear that her fingerprints clearly showed that the value of the worker is number one, and we've certainly benefited from that.
I was going to ask if there's any takeaway or something that other people might be able to directly apply, but I think you said it already. Just find a compassionate leader. That's all it takes.
Well, I mean, it's not all it takes. It is one ingredient, right? I think the challenge now in the workspace, especially for utilities, is that we're going to have to meet the challenge of where things are, right? Not only from what we offer as an incentive to participate in this sector, right? But to be far more concise in what value return comes from investing your time and talent in this sector as well. I think that in itself brings us right back to what we're talking about in terms of asset management. We have to show that we're improving, right?
The measurements, yeah.
We have to show that we're improving. I have to show that we're not only a part of what we have to move just beyond being essential, right? We have to be a part of the now and the future. And I think that's definitely what will be, I think, one of the core values going forward in terms of what we have to offer and why this is something that you would want to, you know, invest your time and talent in.
Excellent. Well, that expanded into more than just the introductory comment that I thought we'd have, but what I was going to start with was Happy Black History Month, and I wanted you to share with us one of your favorite parts of African-American history or favorite character.
So for me, you know, I want to just make it a little bit more personal for me. So I'm originally from Jamaica, right? And a little known factor for those who don't have that much of a depth of knowledge of Black history is the Marcus Garvey, right? Marcus Garvey is a national hero in Jamaica, but also Marcus Garvey was quite critical in what was the evolution of what it meant to be proud of your ethnicity, right? In the transitional years in the early 1900s, right? And I think what he did in terms of, was a big part of the Harlem Renaissance, and certainly the reshaping of the character to be in a post-slavery environment. One of the, you know, famous sayings that you had coming out of that was, well, he established the UNIA, right? Which was really about Black empowerment.
UNIA.
United Negro, I can't remember the last two acronyms.
IA. Institute of America?
Not necessarily. I'd have to look that up and forgive me.
Okay.
That one.
I will do that while you're talking.
Right. But in a sense, really what he did is that his entire philosophy around it was an understanding of who you were and the value of who you were. One of my most favorite sayings that he has is that people who have no understanding of their past or their history is like a tree without roots, right? So for me, that has always been a core understanding of not only understanding who you are in the experience of being Black, but also why it is important to understand that there's a larger ecosystem that you exist in, right? And to have that individual value makes you a part of a larger community going forward. And certainly here in Black History Month, even though it is a time that we focus on, it really is a broader understanding of the fact that this is a critical part of our history, but it's a shared history that we all have. And certainly in the commitment of advancing the interests of those who are disenfranchised is certainly something that's a core value for all of us as we move forward, if we want to really live up to the creed of all men being equal.
Yes, without a doubt. And this Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is a perfect opportunity to continue righting some of the inequities that we have had. I'd like to talk a little bit about the Job Act or the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and asset management, but also how it can help with equity.
Sure.
Let's start with any direct way that IIJA is going to touch you at WSSC. Is that clear?
Yeah, definitely. We hope that, well, put it this way, for us, it's none of what would have been the typical engagements, right? WSSC, to its credit, was very progressive to have had a proactive program to eliminate lead service lines from our system from over a decade ago, right? So we're certainly not in what would have been the typical footprint of the water portion of the infrastructure bill to eliminate lead service lines. So for us, that's not necessarily a point of engagement. However, as with all utilities, especially those who have longer service histories and aging infrastructure, we certainly are looking to partner and receive the capital injection benefit from it to close our infrastructure funding gap, right? As with most of utilities as well, we've experienced revenue pressures over COVID, certainly realized by the economic downturn that's there, which has really affected our capabilities to continue our continued investment in infrastructure renewals. So hopefully through the funding that comes down to the states and through the SRF loan programs, we'll be able to move forward some of our infrastructure priorities right now, which either had to be deferred or delayed because of adjustments on our fiscal policy due to revenue shortfalls.
And I have to apologize to our audience. I'm so familiar with you and the Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission that I didn't even introduce you properly and say that you're the asset manager for this large organization. How do you define the organization in terms of
WSSC Water is the 8th largest water wastewater utility in the U.S. We have close to over a million accounts, right? We serve what is 2 of the largest suburban districts in Maryland. That's close proximity to Washington, D.C., Montgomery and Prince George's County. We consider ourselves to be one of the premier organizations in really the water and wastewater infrastructure sector. We value, our core values are really around innovation and really we've just celebrated, we're now 104 years old, right? Starting off from what was for initial implementation to be fire, to respond to fires, and then having transformed ourselves over that long history into being a core part of our neighborhood. We consider ourselves to be an anchor institution, really to be a catalyst for the further improvement of the communities that we serve. So My role here is I am the division manager for enterprise asset management, which oversees the implementation of asset management program throughout the entire organization, covering all of our portfolios from vertical water and wastewater, and same for linear water and wastewater as well.
Excellent. Thank you. And I hope the audience will forgive me for not letting you say that right off from the beginning. So with many of the water systems around the country, the lead pipes is the inequity, and the IJA will address that. Is there anything that the Infrastructure Act will help you make more equitable? Maybe your level of service, or I don't know. Where do you think that might help?
I wouldn't say there's anything, because we've done that elimination of lead service lines in our service area, that's going to have a direct impact from that. I do say one thing, though, is that it has really helped to solidify infrastructure equity as a core value for the water wastewater industry, right? And one of the overlooked portions of the bill, which I think is going to make major impact, is the capability through funding for it to have impact on low served areas in terms of sewer treatment, right? That's also one of the main overlooked areas. That's usually what you have in native populations, and also what is in the Black Belt down south, right? Where you have neighborhoods that are developed that are either on aging septic, not connected to the larger collection system, and usually lacking funding in terms of increasing the infrastructure, right? It's really one of our hidden deficits that's really there, because most people consider to modern sanitization to be available consistently across the US, but that's not the case, right? And I think this will go a far way in terms of increasing what will be the environmental justice portion for all citizens, hopefully.
Excellent. That's a great insight. Appreciate that. And then, are there any initiatives this year that you're focused on?
Yes, definitely that. So one of the things that we're working on now, that I've been working on for quite some time, well, I'd say two things. Well, one of the things that I'm most proud of is that I've worked with my team here internally to develop what is a equity scoring structure that we're using in our capital improvement program, right? So one of the things, we serve a pretty progressive area, and one of the core values for both of those areas is equity, right? And when we're looking on racial equity and social justice, we have to understand that infrastructure is not necessarily immune from those inequities as well. So one of the things we were looking on is how could we create an objective framework that would allow equity to have influence over our infrastructure priorities, right? And our funding priorities, but do it in a way that we could not only defend, but was based on objective information. So my team worked we worked very closely with our stakeholder partners in both counties to really develop what we think is, at least from what we know right now, the first model that we have in the water wastewater sector that we're about to pilot, that's based on open source data. So what we did was to utilize census tract information, which has all of the general federal equity factors, right? To identify areas within our service area that have deficits in terms of equity, right? Factors, whether that is based on income, whether that is based on other socioeconomic factors, right? Even down to things such as the percentage of children who have supplemental meals at school and otherwise. What we did with that information, because then we have this geospatial information that's based on that aligns us with what are the broader municipal priorities, because they use the same information. We then were able to overlap that onto our geographical data in terms of where our projects are, and then establish what is a framework to evaluate a return on investment based on if that project was going to provide an improvement in level of service for those areas, right? And have that baked into our prioritization structure so that we could have a way to objectively compare projects in terms of their funding priorities that bring what is an added socioeconomic impact for us and for our community in terms of prioritizing that funding, right? So previous funding structures would have various ways of trying to evaluate what are soft targets, right? So you're not talking just the straight level of service improvement, but how does this impact the community? Mm-hmm. We're able to develop that in partnership with that, work with a GIS-based model and the census data. We piloted that in terms of doing several test runs on previous year CIPs. And now we're moving into the pilot phase implementation, which I think will be a game changer for us in terms of having equity as a realized factor in terms of our prioritization. So that's something I'm pretty proud of with our team.
Wow. Do you have that set up so you can measure results? And are you anticipating, publicizing those results? Because I think a webinar on this when you're ready would be really good for the other systems to see.
Yeah, certainly once we've gone through our pilot implementation, so we can really get a good sense of how the model is resilient to the in-process stressors that are there, we'll certainly be willing to share that. And also once we've been able to socialize it more with our municipal partners based on real world results, we'll definitely be willing to share more.
Yeah, you gotta take care of your partners first, but we want to help you amplify your results as soon as possible. And Cecilia has a question that's kind of related to that. So you've taken the information that's publicly available, yes, but what are you doing? Are you engaging with stakeholders? How are you doing that? Now, clearly you've got the municipal partners, but are you doing anything else?
So we've worked with our Intergovernmental Relations Office to really establish partnerships with what are the stakeholders of interest in this, right? But really this came down through what was, I would say, requirements from Montgomery and Prince George's County, more so Montgomery County, through racial equity and social justice criteria that they've established for all of their municipal organizations that they've done, right? That really added the catalyst to it. Also for Prince George's County, equity is one of their primary factors that they look on in terms of going forward. So they're the main two points that we worked on. I know myself and Karen Riley, we also worked with other organizations such as U.S. Water Alliance and other organizations that look on it from a broader water sector perspective to really look on how do we inject or create frameworks to allow equity to have the space of influence in our decision making. So we've done it on various different levels. This is a far more discrete example that we're trying to incubate internally. And once we've kind of gotten a good grasp of it in the real world, I think we'll be able to share more.
Great. So another thing I was remiss, you won an award.
Yeah, I see.
Can you tell us a little about that?
Okay, so I work with and I'm a board member for what is the Virginia Tech Swim Center Sustainable Water Infrastructure Management Institute. It's set up by Dr. Sunil Sinha from Virginia Tech. So I've been working with them for quite some time. The entire impetus of the organization is really to work on what is a asset management smart data strategy for how we improve water and wastewater infrastructure. So this year I was awarded the infrastructure award for a lot of the work I've done to really try to advance asset management in the water wastewater sector. So I was very proud of that achievement, but certainly something that reflects the passion that I have for this work.
Excellent. Was there a ceremony or it's everything?
Well, it was a virtual ceremony. We had to, virtually convene what was this year's conference. Hopefully next year, we'll be able to have that and pretty much physically collect the award from the previous year. So it's been a good year. Also, I want to highlight that my team, we're also awarded this year a Smart 50 award for what is another innovative project that we did, where we worked with one of our technology partner, Optimatics, to pretty much develop what is a smart tool to help us to select what is the most optimal packages for our water main replacement program. For those who are in the water utility sector, one of the hardest things to do is you have a very dispersed network, right? A limited amount of funds that you have to engage with each year. various factors that go into which pipes do you want to change, right? As you can imagine, there's a certain threshold or bandwidth for that efficiency when it comes on to humans trying to do that work. But efficiency is really what we were really looking on. And we worked with them to develop a model that helped us to take in all of the factors, infrastructure, socioeconomic, and otherwise, to run what is a cloud-based engine that takes all of our input points. So all of the assets that we've identified that are eligible for renewal, all of our, critical factors, whether those are, pavement moratoriums, whether those are priority areas for development based on our counties, whether those are strategic priorities for our organization, or infrastructure limitations. What is our package size for our contracts? What is, or cap on spending and otherwise? Run that through millions of iterations to come up with what we think is the most optimal package that brings us as close as possible to a package that is optimal in its design, in its planning design, so that we can go ahead and design more efficient packages that are more efficient in the return on investment and return in our level of service improvement on construction, right? So we're hoping to, as we implement this further, that we'll be able to have a much higher efficiency level in terms of or a level of service metrics, but also results that go beyond just reduction of water main breaks in terms of further aligning in a smart model with the various elements that go into why you renew your infrastructure and also some of the disruptive factors that you want to mitigate.
Excellent. Is there a document you can share with us that we can post and let other people know about? That sounds like something other people would be interested in learning about.
Yeah, sure. Actually, one of the things I'm most proud of with that as well is that we were able to establish what was a profit sharing partnership with it, right? So we own the intellectual property for the tool, right? And for that as well, we've been able to add an additional revenue stream coming into the utility for sales going forward based on the fact that we own that intellectual property and having that IP as really a point of revenue.
Okay, so other utilities are reaching out to you, and
yeah, there are other utilities through that will have evaluated the tool through that vendor, right? Because they're the ones who are developed and pretty much sell the tool, right? We own the intellectual property, however, we own the IP. So we have a portion of what is the royalties that come from each sale that they make.
Excellent. So in the remaining time that we have, I'd like to ask you what you would like the ALN to do this year. If you were, king of the ALN, what do you think would be good for us to be working on this year?
So I think, I've really appreciated the fact, Mike, for you and Jim to have really brought focus to what is environmental justice, right? I think that's certainly something that has really taken on a different perspective now in terms of understanding that asset management can be an implementation tool to lean into those factors as well. Well, one of the things I think is of good focus, and is something that I actually tried to, with other partners, lobby directly with the EPA to try and get done, was the fact that I think a glaring mistake that we made with the infrastructure bill was not to have a requirement for asset management plans as a point of entry for accessing the funds, right? Because one of the things I'm most concerned about is we've been here before with the stimulus program and with other things where we tend to get into the perspective of having shovel-ready projects to be executed, right? Problem with shovel-ready is never usually viewed through the lens of what fits into an integrated planning model to bring you the best return on investment going forward, or is strategically, optimal. And I think an asset management plan would have given a vehicle that would have broadened the perspective as to how we go about that. As my friend George Hawkins likes to say, we needed to really look on what are shovel-worthy projects versus shovel-ready projects, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's hopefully that's something that the ALN can really help to amplify the fact that we need to move from the recessive gene, if you would want to call it, of leaning to cut in the ribbon and shovel ready, because almost always what ends up happening is that a couple of years down the line, we have that disconnect with the public and our stakeholders as to what did this do, because a lot of problems still exist.
Well, thank you for bringing that up, because that is indeed something that the Asset Leadership Network is interested in. We equally were upset that there wasn't anything about asset management plans, but we're hoping that in this phase of rules and regulation development, that we can get the message out to the federal agencies and have them put it into their requirements as opposed to in the act.
Yeah, and I think the guidance is certainly the vehicle that we could use that to do.
So that's part of the reason why we're doing this strong push on infrastructure in the first quarter this year, and that our summit is on infrastructure sustainability, how to make those dollars last and allow those infrastructure assets to perform the way they're supposed to for a long period of time, have requirements for maintenance funding, portions of it. So perhaps you can join us as we do virtual lobbying and other activities to bring attention to that, the benefit of that.
Yeah, and certainly I think one of the things was that because the infrastructure bill is so broad in its scope, the asset management plans would have been the perfect vehicle to connect the dots between different portfolios of infrastructure, right? Because we're gonna have those competing needs happening over and over again, where you replace the bridge, but you have to replace the transmission line that runs under the bridge, right? There's the rail line that's working with that, right? You have the broadband, and the thing is that right now, without an integrated framework, you don't know how all of those correlate together. And then something that allows you to then compare those priorities so you can have smarter planning that's happening, right? And certainly, I would hope that going forward, this can be a platform where we can really try to engage in what is a smarter planning framework, right? Than what we've been doing all along.
Excellent. Well, as always, the time flies with you. I've never met you in person, but when we do get together, it needs to be like some kind of weekend program, because I want to sit and talk with you for hours. But this is the end of our time for today. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Always a pleasure, Mike, and certainly appreciate the partnership with the ALN and all your staff there, and certainly looking forward to continuing to championing the asset management cause going forward.
All right, so then let me just one more time say, thank you, Hugh, and thank our members. Give a shout out. I spoke with Robert today. It was a very good conversation, and I asked him, please say the exact same things next week when we talk. And he said, yeah, I've got this down pat. He's very passionate about asset management. And next week on February 16th, this really nice program with the Australian Asset Management Council. Then we're going to be learning more from Australia, City of Greater Geelong, and then this sustainable value creation from infrastructure asset leadership in the March 15th and 16th. So just one more time, thank you, Hugh, and thanks to our audience. We do this for you, so we appreciate your attendance. Thanks.
All right, Mike, until next time.